Good morning, my dear students. A warm welcome for today's management accounting class. In today's class, we will be starting with a new chapter, that is fund flow analysis. In this particular chapter, in detail, we will be studying with what exactly the fund is all about, the difference with cash and fund, and how the fund flow takes place in an organization. When there is a flow of fund, what are all the consequences, that is how that particular fund will be utilized, where it will be applied, and at the same time we go for studying what are the various sources of fund flow into an organization, right? So ಇಲ್ಲಿ ಬೇಸಿಕಲಿ ನಾವು ಫಸ್ಟ್ ಥಿಯರಿಟಿಕಲ್ ಆಸ್ಪೆಕ್ಟ್ ಇದೆಲ್ಲ ಓದಿದ್ಮೇಲೆ ಫೈನಲ್ ಆಗಿ ಒಂದು ಫಂಡ್ ಫ್ಲೋ ಸ್ಟೇಟ್ಮೆಂಟ್ ಹೇಗೆ ಪ್ರಿಪೇರ್ ಮಾಡಬೇಕು ಅಂತ ಹೇಳಿ ನೋಡ್ತೀವಿ. ಫಂಡ್ ಫ್ಲೋ ಸ್ಟೇಟ್ಮೆಂಟ್ ಪ್ರಿಪೇರ್ ಮಾಡಬೇಕು ಅಂದ್ರೆ ನಾವು ಫಸ್ಟ್ ವರ್ಕಿಂಗ್ ಕ್ಯಾಪಿಟಲ್ ಚೇಂಜಸ್ ನೋಡ್ಕೋಬೇಕು ಆರ್ಗನೈಸೇಷನ್ ಅಲ್ಲಿ. ಸೊ ಇಲ್ಲಿ ಏನಾಗುತ್ತೆ, ಎಲ್ಲಾ ಆಂಗಲ್ ಅಲ್ಲೂ ನಾವು ಆರ್ಗನೈಸೇಷನ್ ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಒಂದು ಸ್ಟೇಟ್ ಫಂಡ್ ಫ್ಲೋ ಹೇಗೆ ನಡೆಯುತ್ತೆ ಅಂತ ನೋಡ್ತೀವಿ. That is, we concentrate on the current assets and current liability. We concentrate on the expenses and incomes. At last, we concentrate on the how this fund is being utilized, where it is being applied, and from where we are getting the fund. This is what we discuss in this particular chapter. ನಾನು ಹೇಳಿದೆ ಫಂಡ್ ಫ್ಲೋ ಅನಾಲಿಸಿಸ್ ಅಂದ ತಕ್ಷಣ ಒಂದು ಡೀಟೇಲ್ ಅನಾಲಿಸಿಸ್ ಮಾಡ್ತೀವಿ. ಒಂದು ಆರ್ಗನೈಸೇಷನ್ಗೆ ಫಂಡ್ ಎಲ್ಲಿಂದ ಬರ್ತಾ ಇದೆ ಅಂತ ಹೇಳಿ, ಆ ಬರ್ತಾ ಇರ್ಬೇಕಾದ್ರೆ ಒಂದು ಫಂಡ್ ನ ಹೇಗೆ ಯುಟಿಲೈಸ್ ಮಾಡ್ತಾ ಇದಾರೆ, ಅದನ್ನ ಎಲ್ಲಿ ಇನ್ವೆಸ್ಟ್ ಮಾಡ್ತಿದ್ದಾರೆ, ಎಲ್ಲಿ ಅವರು ಅಪ್ಲೈ ಮಾಡ್ತಿದ್ದಾರೆ ಅಂತ ಹೇಳಿ. ಅಂಡ್ ಒಂದು ಆರ್ಗನೈಸೇಷನ್ ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಎಲ್ಲಾ ಡಿಫ್ರೆಂಟ್ ಟೈಪ್ಸ್ ಆಫ್ ಅಸೆಟ್ಸ್ ಇರುತ್ತೆ. ನಾವು ಏನ್ ಮಾಡ್ತೀವಿ, ಕರೆಂಟ್ ಅಸೆಟ್ಸ್, ಕರೆಂಟ್ ಲಯಬಿಲಿಟಿ ಕಾನ್ಸಂಟ್ರೇಟ್ ಮಾಡ್ತೀವಿ. ಈ ಕರೆಂಟ್ ಅಸೆಟ್ಸ್, ಕರೆಂಟ್ ಲಯಬಿಲಿಟೀಸ್ ಕಾನ್ಸಂಟ್ರೇಟ್ ಮಾಡಿ ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಅನಲೈಸ್ ಮಾಡಿ ವರ್ಕಿಂಗ್ ಕ್ಯಾಪಿಟಲ್ ಏನು ಅಂತ ನೋಡ್ತೀವಿ. Whether day by day the working capital has been increased or whether there is a decrease in the organization, right? ಅದನ್ನು ನಾವು ನೋಡ್ತೀವಿ. ಬಿಕಾಸ್ ವರ್ಕಿಂಗ್ ಕ್ಯಾಪಿಟಲ್ ಕಡಿಮೆ ಆದ್ರೆ ನಮಗೇನ್ ಅರ್ಥ, ದುಡ್ಡು ಉಳಿತಾಯ ಮಾಡ್ತಾ ಇದೀವಿ, ವಿ ಆರ್ ಗೆಟಿಂಗ್ ಅ ಸೋರ್ಸ್ ಫಾರ್ ದಿ ಆರ್ಗನೈಸೇಷನ್. ಅದೇ ವರ್ಕಿಂಗ್ ಕ್ಯಾಪಿಟಲ್ ಜಾಸ್ತಿ ಆಗ್ತಾ ಇದೆ ಅಂದ್ರೆ ನಾವ್ ಎಲ್ಲೋ ದುಡ್ಡು ಕಳ್ಕೊಂತ ಇದೀವಿ, ಮತ್ಲಬ್ ದೇರ್ ಇಸ್ ಅನ್ ಎಕ್ಸ್ಪೆನ್ಸಸ್ ಅಂತ ಹೇಳಿ. ಅಂಡ್ ಅಟ್ ದ ಸೇಮ್ ಟೈಮ್ ವಿ ಕಾನ್ಸಂಟ್ರೇಟ್ ವಿತ್ ದಿ ಎಕ್ಸ್ಪೆನ್ಸಸ್ ಅಂಡ್ ಇನ್ಕಮ್ ಆಫ್ ದಿ ಆರ್ಗನೈಸೇಷನ್. ಎಕ್ಸ್ಪೆನ್ಸಸ್ ಅಂಡ್ ಇನ್ಕಮ್ ನಾವು ಕ್ಯಾಲ್ಕುಲೇಟ್ ಮಾಡಿ ಅದನ್ನ ಅನಲೈಸ್ ಮಾಡಬೇಕಾದ್ರೆ we come to know whether the organization is getting the funds from the operational activity or whether they are losing from the operational activity. That is, when the activity is taking place, day-to-day activity, when it is taking place, because with that activity, whether the organization is getting a funds or whether they are losing the funds, that we will be analyzing with the expenses and income. And at last, with the fixed assets, with your share capital. ಜನರಲ್ ಆಗಿ ನಾವು ಹೆಂಗೆ ಕಂಪೇರೇಟಿವ್ ಮಾಡ್ತಿದ್ವಿ, ಲಾಂಗ್ ಟರ್ಮ್, ಶಾರ್ಟ್ ಟರ್ಮ್, ಅದೇ ರೀತಿ ಕರೆಂಟ್ ಅಸೆಟ್ಸ್, ಕರೆಂಟ್ ಲಯಬಿಲಿಟೀಸ್ ಇಂದ ವರ್ಕಿಂಗ್ ಕ್ಯಾಪಿಟಲ್ ಫೈಂಡ್ ಔಟ್ ಮಾಡ್ತೀವಿ, ಎಕ್ಸ್ಪೆನ್ಸಸ್, ಇನ್ಕಮ್ ಇಂದ ಫಂಡ್ಸ್ ಫ್ರಮ್ ಆಪರೇಷನ್ ಆರ್ ಫಂಡ್ಸ್ ಲಾಸ್ ಫ್ರಮ್ ಆಪರೇಷನ್, ಇದೆರಡು ಫೈಂಡ್ ಔಟ್ ಮಾಡ್ತೀವಿ. ಅಂಡ್ ಅಲ್ಟಿಮೇಟ್ ಏನ್ ಉಳ್ಕೊಂಡಿದೆ, ವಿ ಹ್ಯಾವ್ ದ ಫಿಕ್ಸ್ಡ್ ಅಸೆಟ್ಸ್ ದೇರ್, ದಟ್ ಇಸ್ ಅಸೆಟ್ಸ್, ಅಂಡ್ ಲಯಬಿಲಿಟೀಸ್ ಪಾರ್ಟ್ ಅಲ್ಲಿ ದ ಶೇರ್ ಹೋಲ್ಡರ್ಸ್ ಫಂಡ್ಸ್ ಅಂತ ರಿಸರ್ವ್. ಈ ಎರಡನ್ನು ಅನಲೈಸ್ ಮಾಡಿ ವೆದರ್ ವಿ ಆರ್ ಹ್ಯಾವಿಂಗ್ ಅ ಸೋರ್ಸಸ್ ಆಫ್ ಫಂಡ್ ಆರ್ ವೆದರ್ ವಿ ಆರ್ ಅಪ್ಲೈಯಿಂಗ್ ದ ಫಂಡ್ ಅಂತ ಹೇಳಿ. Like if there is a issue of shares, that means you are getting the funds. If there is a investment, that means you are applying or investing in some area. These two things will be analyzed with your assets and with your reserve fund and the share capital there, right? So in detail, first we'll be studying the theoretical aspect, and in future classes, step by step, we will be discussing. Okay, now let us get into the concept. See, as I told, fund flow analysis. Here first we will be discussing with the meaning of fund. See, generally you will fund and takshana you may get confused. Cash and fund ella onde alva ant heli. This fund we will be discussing in two angles. That is in narrow sense and in broad sense. That is narrow interpretation, broad interpretation. Before going with the fund, basic difference I'll tell you all with the cash and the fund. Cash is something which you have in your hand, in your organization, which is in your liquid form in the organization. But fund and ಹೇಳಿದ್ರೆ, what is fund is nothing but where you are getting into the organization, from where you are getting the money into the organization. That can be in any form. Getting my point? Cash is something, the liquid cash which is available in the organization. ನಮ್ಮ ಬಿಸ್ನೆಸ್ ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಲಿಕ್ವಿಡ್ ಕ್ಯಾಶ್ ನಮ್ಮ ಹತ್ರ ಏನಿದೆಯೋ ಅದನ್ನ ನಾವು ಕ್ಯಾಶ್ ಅಂತ, ಫಾರ್ಮ್ ಆಫ್ ಕರೆನ್ಸಿ, ಮನಿ, ದುಡ್ಡು, ಕಾಯಿನ್ಸ್ ಏನಾದ್ರೂ ಆಗಿರ್ಬೋದು. ಫಂಡ್ ಅನ್ನೋದು ಹೊರಗಡೆಯಿಂದ ನಮಗೆ ಬರುವಂತ ಇನ್ಫ್ಲೋ, ಆ ಇನ್ಫ್ಲೋ ಆಫ್ ಕ್ಯಾಶ್ ನಮ್ಗೆ ಏನ್ ಹೊರಗಡೆಯಿಂದ ಸೋರ್ಸಸ್ ಬರುತ್ತೆ ಅದನ್ನ ನಾವು ಫಂಡ್ ಅಂತೀವಿ. ದಟ್ ಕ್ಯಾನ್ ಬಿ ಇನ್ ಎನಿ ಫಾರ್ಮ್. ಇಟ್ ಕ್ಯಾನ್ ಬಿ ದ ಫಾರ್ಮ್ ಆಫ್ ಶೇರ್ಸ್ or it can be the form of debentures, loan, anything for that we call it as the fund. That is a base difference with the cash and the fund. ಇವಾಗ ಈ ಫಂಡ್ ಅನ್ನೋದೇ, right? See, this chapter very clearly says that is we will be analyzing the fund flow of an organization. Now, this fund can be discussed in two ways, that is in narrow sense and in the broad sense. Here only it has been given. There are two interpretations for the term fund, narrow sense and broad sense. In narrow sense, the fund means only cash and cash equivalents, and it is as cash flow statement or cash flow analysis. ಇಲ್ಲಿ cash ಅಂದ್ರೆ now we go for analyzing only the cash flow statement prepare ಮಾಡ್ತೀವಿ. Fund ಮಾಡಬೇಕಾದ್ರೆ fund flow statement prepare ಮಾಡ್ತೀವಿ. So in the narrow sense, like modern days ಬರೋ ಮುಂಚೆ we used to just say fund is nothing but the cash or cash equivalents. But later in the broader sense, what happened here? Not only cash and equivalent, but also marketable securities. It is termed as fund flow. As I told, it is not that only it has to come in liquid form. It can be in equivalence to cash in any ways. So the fund can be discussed in two ways. In narrow sense, we say fund as only the cash. Broad sense, we say cash and cash equivalents with the marketable securities also. Getting my point? So when you check out here, next we discuss with the next concept, working capital. See here again we have two working capital. This concepts, concepts we will be discussing under working capital. That is gross concept, or it is also called as gross working capital. The second concept is net concept or net working capital. Illi gross andre enandre, it refers to the terms total investment in current asset or total amount of investment in current assets is called as the gross working capital. The current assets or total amount invested in current assets, that we say it as the gross working capital. Andre gross working capital andre eno bari investment navu ಏನು ಮಾಡಿದೀವಿ current assets ಮೇಲೆ. ಆ ಕರೆಂಟ್ ಅಸೆಟ್ಸ್ ಆದ್ಮೇಲೆ ಕರೆಂಟ್ ಲಯಬಿಲಿಟೀಸ್ ಜೊತೆ ಕಂಪೇರ್ ಮಾಡಿ ಅದು ಮೈನಸ್ ಮಾಡಿ ಕರೆಂಟ್ ಅಸೆಟ್ಸ್ ಮೈನಸ್ ಕರೆಂಟ್ ಲಯಬಿಲಿಟೀಸ್ ಎಲ್ಲ ಹೋದ್ರೆ ಏನಿದೆಯೋ ಅದನ್ನ ನಾವು ನೆಟ್ ವರ್ಕಿಂಗ್ ಕ್ಯಾಪಿಟಲ್ ಅಂತೀವಿ. Right? So gross working capital is nothing but it is only the investment what we have done on the current asset. When it comes with the net working capital, see here it is the excess of the current assets over the current liabilities. The other term where you can put it is the difference between current assets and current liabilities. See here when you go for representing, formula will be there. Working capital is equals to current assets minus current liabilities. This we call it as the net working capital. See, first before we getting into the concept, I want everyone to be very clear with current assets and current liability. Current assets ಯಾವ್ಯಾವ್ದನ್ನ current assets ಅಂತೀವಿ, current liabilities ಇದು ಎರಡು ಗೊತ್ತಿಲ್ಲ ಅಂದ್ರೆ ನೀವು ಸ್ಟೇಟ್ಮೆಂಟ್ ಆಫ್ ವರ್ಕಿಂಗ್ ಕ್ಯಾಪಿಟಲ್ ಮಾಡೋದಿಕ್ಕಾಗಲ್ಲ. ಬಿಕಾಸ್ ಫಸ್ಟ್ ಸ್ಟೆಪ್ ಅಲ್ಲಿ ವರ್ಕಿಂಗ್ ಕ್ಯಾಪಿಟಲ್ ನಾವು ಕಾನ್ಸಂಟ್ರೇಟ್ ಮಾಡೋದೇ ಕರೆಂಟ್ ಅಸೆಟ್ಸ್ ಕರೆಂಟ್ ಲಯಬಿಲಿಟೀಸ್. ಒಂದು ಬ್ಯಾಲೆನ್ಸ್ ಶೀಟ್ ಕೊಟ್ಟಿದ್ದಾರೆ ಅಂದ್ರೆ ನಿಮಗೆ ಕರೆಂಟ್ ಅಸೆಟ್ಸ್ ಯಾವುದು ಕರೆಂಟ್ ಲಯಬಿಲಿಟೀಸ್ ಯಾವುದು ಅಂತ ನಿಮ್ಗೆ ಕ್ಲಿಯರ್ ಆಗಿ ಗೊತ್ತಿರಬೇಕು. ಓಕೆ, now let us get into the next concept. Now let us discuss with the current and non-current accounts or assets. So now current assets or current accounts, very clear. I think everyone are aware of it. As you are final year students, you people should be in a position to know what exactly the current assets or current liabilities are all about. See, current assets are the assets which are converted into cash within a period of 12 months. I think it is very clear, where you can easily convert into a liquid cash within a short period of time. A short period of time within one accounting year. When you say within one accounting year, it is nothing but within a period of 12 months. When it comes with the current liabilities, on the other hand, are the liabilities to be discharged or disposed of within a period of a year. Same, all current liabilities andre eno, the obligation of which has to be discharged. And ನಾವು ಏನೇ ಇದ್ರೆ ಪೇ ಮಾಡೋದು within one particular period. Again, ಅಲ್ಲಿ short period ಎಷ್ಟು one accounting year ಎಷ್ಟು 12 months. Getting my point? So it can be converted into cash within a one period of time, that is within 12 months, within one accounting year. We call it as the current asset, and which can be discharged or disposed, which can be paid within a short period of time, that is again 1 year. Our time remains same, that we call it as the current liabilities. Now here this table I want you all to be perfect. That is, what are the things which we call it as current liabilities and current assets. Current liabilities, bills payable, sundry debtors, that is accounts payable, accrued or outstanding expenses, dividends payable, bank overdraft, short-term loans and advances. Please be very clear with short-term loans. Okay, long terms andre adil barodilla. short-term loans, and provision against current assets, provision for taxation if it does not amount of appropriation of profits, proposed dividend, maybe a current or non-current liability. Illi non-current idu. So ಇಲ್ಲಿ ಏನಾಗುತ್ತೆ ಅಂದ್ರೆ it is very clearly given. See here, it is non-current liability. See, these are something which we call as the current liabilities. Please be very clear with these terms. And now coming to the current assets. When I come with the current assets, we have cash in hand, cash at bank, bills receivable, sundry debtors or accounts receivable, short-term loans and advances, temporary or marketable investment, inventories, that is stock, such as raw material, work in progress, stores or spares, finished goods, prepaid expenses, and accrued income. These are the current assets. I want you all to be very clear with these two terms. Okay. See, outstanding, I think people are already aware. Now, ಇವಗಿಲ್ಲಿ outstanding ಅಂತ ಹೇಳ್ತೀವೋ, that is nothing but where income is earned. See, ಇಲ್ಲಿ accrued ಅಂತಿದೆ. Don't get confused. Something accrued, outstanding ಅಂತ ಏನೋ ಹೇಳ್ತಾ ಇದ್ದಾರೆ ಅಂತ. Nothing, where you have earned the income but not yet received. Getting my point? Okay. So, it can be income or it can be expenses. Get to pay ಅನ್ನೋದು outstanding ಆಗುತ್ತೆ. Like, where you have to pay your things. Income, accrued income ಅಂದ್ರೆ you have you have a income, you have a earnings, but you have not yet received. That we call it as the accrued income. Outstanding, you have to pay, not yet paid. It is only we say it as the outstanding expenses. Okay. So I think people are clear with the current assets and the current liabilities. Now let us check with the non-current assets and non-current liability. That is assets, permanent assets. You'll notice this table nodadre you will be getting list of non-current assets here. Non-current or permanent assets and liability. Non-current assets are nothing but are the assets other than the current assets are called as non-current assets. This includes the fixed assets and long-term investment and fictitious assets. Okay. So here these are called as the permanent assets. Non-current liabilities and liabilities other than the current liabilities are called as the non-current liability. This includes the shareholder funds. Fund and ತಕ್ಷಣ ಅಲ್ಲಿ ನಮಗೆ ಎರಡು ಬರುತ್ತೆ. Share capital, reserve and surplus, long-term borrowings and provision. So this is the meaning with the assets and liability. That is fixed assets and liability. Here you can check with the table, and the table it has been clearly given. So non-permanent liability, that is non-current liability and nodre equity share capital, preference share capital, redeemable share capital. Okay. Borrowings, debentures, long-term loan, share premium account, share fortified accounts, P&L account, credit balance, but capital reserve, capital redemption reserve, provisions, it can be on anything, appropriation of profits, general reserve, and permanent assets or non-current assets and nodadre goodwill, land, building, plant and machinery, furniture and fittings, fixtures antanu barutte, trademarks, patents. Getting my point? Illi permanent like fixed assets ide, non-current assets ide. Getting my point? Okay, fixed assets ನಾವು ಇದು ನೋಡಿದ್ರೆ ನಿಮಗೆ plant and machinery non-current assets ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಬರುತ್ತೆ. Plant and machinery ಇಂಥವೆಲ್ಲ goodwill ಇದೆಲ್ಲ ಬಂದ್ಬಿಟ್ಟು non-current ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಬರುತ್ತೆ. Land and building, plant ಇದೆಲ್ಲ ಬಂದ್ಬಿಟ್ಟು fixed assets ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಬರುತ್ತೆ. ಇನ್ನು ಇಲ್ಲೆಲ್ಲ ಕೊಟ್ಟಿದ್ದೀವಿ ನೋಡಿ, discount on issue of share, discount on issue of debentures, preliminary expenses, and here on the liability side if you check a dividend equalization fund, insurance fund, compensation, all these things will be under the appropriation of profits. So these are the chart which is related to your fixed assets and non-current liability. Okay, that is assets and liability in short helbeku andre. See, don't get confused. First now blind agi assets liabilities anta idhi, but nowadays we make sure we have to express in these terms has to be used over there. Okay. Okay, this table I want you all to be clear with this. Okay. Now let us check with the flow of fund. So when it comes to the flow of fund, how exactly, like inflow and outflow. Aste flow of fund andre either there should be an inflow of fund or there should be an outflow of fund. So outflow of fund ಯಾವಾಗ ಆಗುತ್ತೆ ಅಂದ್ರೆ ನಮ್ಮ ಆರ್ಗನೈಸೇಷನ್ ಇಂದ ನಾವೆಲ್ಲಾದ್ರೂ ಇನ್ವೆಸ್ಟ್ಮೆಂಟ್ ಮಾಡಿದ್ರೆ ಅಥವಾ ಏನಾದ್ರು ಪರ್ಚೇಸ್ ಮಾಡಿದ್ರೆ, ಗೆಟಿಂಗ್ ಮೈ ಪಾಯಿಂಟ್, ಅಥವಾ ಏನಾದ್ರೂ ಪೇ ಮಾಡಿದ್ರೆ ನಮ್ಮ ಕಡೆಯಿಂದ ಕ್ಯಾಶ್ ಹೊರಗಡೆ ಹೋಗುತ್ತೆ. ದೇರ್ ವಿಲ್ ಬಿ ಔಟ್ಫ್ಲೋ ಆಫ್ ಫಂಡ್. ಇನ್ಫ್ಲೋ ಆಫ್ ಫಂಡ್ ಯಾವಾಗ ನಮ್ಗೆ ಯಾವ್ಯಾವ ರೀತಿಯಲ್ಲಿ ನಮ್ಗೆ ಇನ್ಫ್ಲೋ ಆಗುತ್ತೆ ಕ್ಯಾಶ್ ಅಥವಾ ಫಂಡು ಅಂತ. ಲೋನ್ ತಗೋಬೇಕಾದ್ರೆ ಬರುತ್ತೆ, ಅಥವಾ ಶೇರ್ಸ್ ಇಶ್ಯೂ ಮಾಡ್ಬೇಕಾದ್ರೆ ಬರುತ್ತೆ. ವರ್ಕಿಂಗ್ ಕ್ಯಾಪಿಟಲ್ ಕಡಿಮೆ ಆದ್ರೆ ದುಡ್ಡು ಮಿಕ್ಕತ್ತೆ, ಅಥವಾ ಏನಾದ್ರು ನಾವು ಒಂದು ಸೇಲ್ ಮಾಡಿದ್ರೆ ದುಡ್ಡು ಒಳಗಡೆ ಬರುತ್ತೆ. ಸೊ ಹಿಯರ್ see fund flow of fund is nothing but it means the movement of fund. The movement either It can be inflow or it can be outflow or sometimes both, right? So in other words, we can say it is it is the transfer of economic value from one asset of equity to the another ಅಂತ ಹೇಳ್ತೀವಿ. ಒಂದು ಅಸೆಟ್ ಅಥವಾ ಇನ್ನೊಂದರಿಂದ ನಮಗೆ there will be a flow of fund. So when you say flow of fund, it is nothing but the movement of fund, and either it can be inflow, that movement either it can be inflow or outflow or both. This chart very clearly says the movement of fund, how it takes. Inflow of fund, organization ಬರುವಂತ ಟ್ರಾನ್ಸಾಕ್ಷನ್ಸ್ ನಡೆಯೋದು, ಇಲ್ಲಿ ಮತ್ತೆ ಆರ್ಗನೈಸೇಷನ್ ಇಂದ ಹೊರಗಡೆ ಹೋಗುವಂತದನ್ನ ಔಟ್ಫ್ಲೋ ಆಫ್ ಫಂಡ್ ಅಂತೀವಿ. ಇನ್ಫ್ಲೋ ಆಫ್ ಫಂಡ್ ಅಂದ್ರೆ ನಮಗೆ ಯಾವಾಗ ಕ್ಯಾಶ್ ಅಥವಾ ಫಂಡ್ ನಮ್ಮ ಆರ್ಗನೈಸೇಷನ್ ಬರುತ್ತೆ. ವೆನ್ ಯು ಗೋ ಫಾರ್ ಇಶ್ಯೂವಿಂಗ್ ದ ಶೇರ್ಸ್, ಕಂಪನೀಸ್ ನಮ್ಮ ಶೇರ್ಸ್ ನಾವು ಪ್ರಾಸ್ಪೆಕ್ಟಸ್ ಕೊಟ್ಟು ಪಬ್ಲಿಕ್ ಗೆ ನಾವು ಶೇರ್ಸ್ ಕೊಡ್ಬೇಕಾದ್ರೆ ಅವ್ರು ನಮ್ ಶೇರ್ಸ್ ಪರ್ಚೇಸ್ ಮಾಡಿದ್ರೆ ನಮಗೆ ದುಡ್ಡು ಬರುತ್ತೆ. ಇಶ್ಯೂ ಆಫ್ ಡಿಬೆಂಚರ್ಸ್ ಅಥವಾ ನಾವೇ ಬ್ಯಾಂಕ್ ಲೋನ್ ತಗೊಂಡ್ರೆ ನಮಗೆ ಕ್ಯಾಶ್ ಫಂಡ್ ಬರುತ್ತೆ. ಲೋನ್ ತಗೊಂಡ್ರೆ ನಮ್ಗೆ ದುಡ್ಡು ಬಂದೇ ಬರುತ್ತೆ, ರೈಟ್? ಅಥವಾ ಯಾವುದೇ ಒಂದು ಫಿಕ್ಸ್ಡ್ ಅಸೆಟ್ಸ್ ಅಥವಾ ಇನ್ವೆಸ್ಟ್ಮೆಂಟ್ ಸೇಲ್ ಮಾಡಿದ್ರೆ ನಮಗೆ ದುಡ್ಡು ಬರುತ್ತೆ. ಪ್ರಾಫಿಟ್ಸ್ ಇಂದ ದುಡ್ಡು ಬರುತ್ತೆ. ಡಿಕ್ರೀಸ್ ಇನ್ ವರ್ಕಿಂಗ್ ಕ್ಯಾಪಿಟಲ್, ಅದೇ ಐ ಟೋಲ್ಡ್ ಯು ಆಲ್. ಡಿಕ್ರೀಸ್ ಅಂದ್ರೆ ಯಾವಾಗ ನಾವು ವರ್ಕಿಂಗ್ ಕ್ಯಾಪಿಟಲ್ ಡೇ ಟು ಡೇ ಆಕ್ಟಿವಿಟೀಸ್ ಸ್ವಲ್ಪ ದುಡ್ಡು ಕಮ್ಮಿ ಮಾಡ್ತೀವಿ, ಖರ್ಚು ಕಡಿಮೆ ಮಾಡ್ತೀವಿ, ನಮ್ಮಲ್ಲಿ ದುಡ್ಡು ಉಳ್ಕೊಳತ್ತೆ ಅಂತ ಹೇಳಿ, ರೈಟ್? ಸೊ ದಿಸ್ ಆರ್ ದ ಥಿಂಗ್ಸ್ ವೇರ್ ಟ್ರಾನ್ಸಾಕ್ಷನ್ which involves the inflow of funds, and these are the transactions which leads to the outflow of fund. ನಾನು ಅದೇ ಹೇಳಿದೆ, ಯಾವ್ದಾದ್ರು ನಾವು ಶೇರ್ಸ್ ಡಿಬೆಂಚರ್ಸ್ ಅಂತ ರಿಡೀಮ್ ಮಾಡ್ಬೇಕಾದ್ರೆ ಅವ್ರಿಗೆ ಅದು ರಿಟರ್ನ್ ಮಾಡ್ಬೇಕಾದಂತ ಟೈಮ್ ಅಲ್ಲಿ we have to, when you go for redeeming the shares, you have to pay to them. That means there will be a outflow of fund. ತಗೊಂಡಿರುವಂತ ಬ್ಯಾಂಕ್ ಲೋನ್ ನಾವು ರೀಪೇ ಮಾಡ್ಬೇಕಾದ್ರೆ ದುಡ್ಡು ಹೊರಗಡೆ ಹೋಗುತ್ತೆ. ಅಥವಾ ಯಾವ್ದಾದ್ರು ನಾವು ಅಸೆಟ್ಸ್ ಪರ್ಚೇಸ್ ಮಾಡ್ಬೇಕಾದ್ರೆ ಅಥವಾ ಇನ್ವೆಸ್ಟ್ಮೆಂಟ್ ಮೇಲೆ ನಾವು ದುಡ್ಡು ಹಾಕಿದ್ರೆ there will be a outflow of fund. ಪೇಮೆಂಟ್ ಯಾವುದೇ ರೀತಿಯಾದ ಪೇಮೆಂಟ್ ಮಾಡಿದ್ರೆ ನಮ್ದು ದುಡ್ಡು ಹೊರಗಡೆ ಹೋಗುತ್ತೆ, ಟ್ಯಾಕ್ಸ್ ಆಗಿರ್ಬೋದು, ಡಿವಿಡೆಂಟ್ ಆಗಿರ್ಬೋದು. ಅಂಡ್ ಇನ್ಕ್ರೀಸ್ ಇನ್ ದಿ ವರ್ಕಿಂಗ್ ಕ್ಯಾಪಿಟಲ್. ವರ್ಕಿಂಗ್ ಕ್ಯಾಪಿಟಲ್ ದುಡ್ಡು ಜಾಸ್ತಿ ನಾವು ಖರ್ಚು ಮಾಡ್ತಾ ಇದ್ರೆ, ವರ್ಕಿಂಗ್ ಕ್ಯಾಪಿಟಲ್ ಇನ್ಕ್ರೀಸ್ ಜಾಸ್ತಿ ಆಗ್ತಾ ಇದೆ ಅಂದ್ರೆ ಖರ್ಚು ಜಾಸ್ತಿ ಆಗ್ತಾ ಇದೆ, ದುಡ್ಡು ಹೊರಗಡೆ ಹೋಗ್ತಾ ಇದೆ ಅಂತ ಹೇಳಿ. ಸೊ ದಿಸ್ ಶೋಸ್ ದಿ information or a clear picture for you all how exactly the movement of fund takes place. That will be either inflow of fund or outflow. Inflow when it happens, when these following transaction takes place, there will be a inflow of fund. When this transaction affects the business, that time there will be a outflow of fund. Okay, and now let us check with the next concept. See here, procedure for knowing whether a transaction results in the flow of fund or not. ಅಂದ್ರೆ ಹೇಗೆ ನಾವು ಫೈಂಡ್ ಔಟ್ ಮಾಡ್ತೀವಿ ಅಂತ. ಇವಾಗ ಯಾವುದೇ ಒಂದು ಟ್ರಾನ್ಸಾಕ್ಷನ್ ನಡೆದಿದೆ ಅಂದ್ರೆ first we have to find out. See here, these are the procedure. First we need to find out, that is analyze the transaction and find out the two accounts involved. ಒಂದು ಟ್ರಾನ್ಸಾಕ್ಷನ್ಸ್ ಕೊಟ್ಟಿರ್ತಾರೆ. ಜನರಲ್ ಆಗಿ ಒಂದು ಟ್ರಾನ್ಸಾಕ್ಷನ್ ಅಂದ್ರೆ ಏನು? ಕಂಪನಿ ಇಶ್ಯೂಡ್ ಶೇರ್ಸ್ ಟು ದಿ ಪಬ್ಲಿಕ್, ಕಂಪನಿ ಇಶ್ಯೂಡ್ ಶೇರ್ಸ್ ಅಂತ. ಆ ಕಂಪನಿ ಇಶ್ಯೂಡ್ ಶೇರ್ ಒಂದು ಟ್ರಾನ್ಸಾಕ್ಷನ್ ಅಂದ್ರೆ ಫಸ್ಟ್ ನಾವು ನೋಡ್ಬೇಕು ಆ ಪರ್ಟಿಕ್ಯುಲರ್ ಟ್ರಾನ್ಸಾಕ್ಷನ್ ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಎಷ್ಟು ಅಕೌಂಟ್ಸ್, ಎರಡೇ ಅಕೌಂಟ್ಸ್ ಜನರಲ್ ಆಗಿ ಏನಾಗುತ್ತೆ, ಯಾವ್ಯಾವ ಅಕೌಂಟ್ಸ್ ಇನ್ವಾಲ್ವ್ ಆಗಿದೆ, ವೆದರ್ ಇಟ್ ಇಸ್ ಇನ್ವಾಲ್ವ್ ವಿತ್ ಕರೆಂಟ್ ಅಸೆಟ್ ಆರ್ ವೆದರ್ ಇಟ್ ಇಸ್ ಇನ್ವಾಲ್ವ್ ವಿತ್ ನಾನ್ ಕರೆಂಟ್ ಅಸೆಟ್. ದಿಸ್ ಯು ಹ್ಯಾವ್ ಟು ಫೈಂಡ್ ಔಟ್ which type of an asset is, account is been involved, whether it is current account or non-current account. First you need to find out. See, I want you all to be very clear with this step. Once if you don't know this, then you will not be able to analyze. So in order to check whether there is an inflow of fund or outflow of fund, anything inflow or outflow, you need to find out whether there is an inflow or outflow. In order to find out that, once if any transaction is being given, first you should find out what type of accounts is involved in that, whether it is a current account or non-current account. And first you find out that, then make a journal entry of the transaction. As I told, company issued shares and journal entries, so cash or bank account data to share capital account. First you have to make a journal entry, because once if you pass the journal entry, you can easily find out what type of an account it is. Then you can tell whether there is a flow of fund or no. Now determine whether the accounts is involved in the transaction or current or non-current. Getting my point? So ಇಲ್ಲಿ ನೋಡಿದ್ರೆ ಒಂದು current account ಇದೆ, ಒಂದು non-current account ಇದೆ. Cash account is current account, share capital is non-current account. You have to find out whether what type of an account is been involved. Then if both the accounts involved are current, that is either current assets or current liability, it does not result in the flow of funds. My dear students, please be very clear with this point. Okay, note ಮಾಡ್ಕೊಳ್ಳಿ. If there is a involvement of current account, Okay, if both the accounts, when there is an involvement of two current accounts, then there will not be any change. Getting my point? When there is involvement of two current accounts, there will not be any change in the flow of fund. It does not result in the flow of fund. And if both the accounts involved are current account, that is either permanent assets or permanent liability, it shall not result in the flow of fund. Again, if there is involvement of two non-current account, then again there will not be any flow of accounts, so any flow of funds. But if the accounts involved are such that one is current account and while another is non-current account, the current asset and permanent liability or current asset or fixed asset or current liability and fixed asset, then it results in the flow of funds. Please try to understand, be clear with that. If there is two current assets, two current account, no change. Two non-current account, no change. One current account and one non-current account, that means there will be a changes, that is there will be a flow of fund. That we need to find out whether there is inflow or outflow. First we should know that whether there is inflow, flow of fund ಇದೆಯಾ ಇಲ್ವಾ ಅಂತ ಮಾತ್ರ ನಾವು ನೋಡ್ಕೋಬೇಕು. ಅದಾದ್ಮೇಲೆ ನೆಕ್ಸ್ಟ್ ಇಮಿಡಿಯೇಟ್ ಆಗಿ ನೀವು ಫೈಂಡ್ ಔಟ್ ಮಾಡಬಹುದು ಏನಾಗುತ್ತೆ whether there is inflow or outflow ಅಂತ ಹೇಳಿ. Once again I am telling the first rule ಏನು ಅಂದ್ರೆ, okay, let me type here. So the rule will be like this. First I want you all to note this, that is one second. Rule for flow of fund. So what will be the rules here? If a transaction involves only, please make a note of it, only current account. Okay, if a transaction involves only current assets, that means there will be no flow of fund. Okay, again, if a transaction, I'm just typing here, I think you all can make a note of it, involves only non-current account, that means there will be no flow of fund. Getting my point? The other rule is what? If a transaction, these rules I want everyone to remember. If you don't know this rule, it becomes difficult for you all to find out. Without knowing this, by passing the journal entry, if you are very clear that you can recognize there is a flow of fund or not, then well and good. Otherwise you have to be very clear with this particular now rule ಅಂತಾನೆ ಅಂತೀವಿ ಇದನ್ನ. ಈ ರೂಲ್ ನಿಮಗೆ ಅರ್ಥ ಆಗೋಗ್ಬಿಟ್ರೆ ನಿಮಗೆ ಒಂದು ಪರ್ಟಿಕ್ಯುಲರ್ ಟ್ರಾನ್ಸಾಕ್ಷನ್ ಇಂದ ಫ್ಲೋ ಆಫ್ ಫಂಡ್ ಇದೆಯಾ ಇಲ್ವಾ ಅನ್ನೋದು ಈಸಿಯಾಗಿ ಫೈಂಡ್ ಔಟ್ ಮಾಡಬಹುದು. See, if a transaction involves only one current account and one non-current account, okay, at that time it is understood that there will be a flow of fund. ಇದು ಹೇಗೆ ಅಂತ ನಾವು ಫ್ಯೂಚರ್ ಕ್ಲಾಸಸ್ ಅಲ್ಲಿ ನೋಡ್ತೀವಿ. In future classes we will be discussing with examples. See, here I am given, I'll be starting with that. So I want you all to be very clear with these things. Okay, so please make sure. Rule for flow of fund. If a transaction involves only one current account, that means there will not be any flow of fund. By chance, if a transaction involves only one current account, only non-current account, that means there will be no flow of fund. Clear? Then, if a transaction involves one current account and one non-current account, that means there will be a flow of fund. Getting my point? So please be very clear with this. If there is a transaction which involves only one current account, that means there will not be no flow of fund. If a transaction involves only non-current accounts, then there will not be any flow of fund. If a transaction involves one current account and one non-current account, that means there will be a flow of fund. Okay, so with this, I'll be ending the theoretical aspect. In next class, we will be discussing the same. That is, I will discuss with each and every transaction. See, like this, first you have to cash collected from debtors, the journal entry, what it will be. Then you have to find out whether it is a current account or whether it is a non-current account. Again, if it is a current account, you have to find out it is two current account or the only non-current account. ಅದ್ರ ಮೇಲೆ ನಾವು flow of fund ಇದೆಯಾ ಇಲ್ವಾ ಅಂತ ಹೇಳ್ಬಿಟ್ಟು ನೋಡ್ಕೊಂಡು ಹೋಗ್ತೀವಿ. Okay, so with this, I'll be ending today's class. In next class, I'll be discussing in detail how to recognize with that. Okay, how to recognize with the transaction whether there will be a flow of fund or not. So all these theoretical aspects, you all can make a note of points in your notes so that it will be easy for you all to study. Okay, so with this, I'll be ending today's class. Thank you. Have a nice day. I want you all to be perfect with this theoretical aspect before we starting with the practical concept. Okay, thank you. Have a nice day.